Okay. Okay. Well, good afternoon, everyone. I hope that you're well. Today is Wednesday. It's the 19th of November. Time is flying, and we're getting ready for Parshas Toldos. I want to share with you, I've got, they always say it's better to prepare too much than too little. So I don't know if we'll get to page 4. That's a different topic. But the first 3 pages, page 3, all deal with a very, very tiny Rashi in this week's Parsha, which is phenomenal. I have a set of these Chumashim. This is called the Achad Asar Mefarshe Rashi. There are 11 commentaries on Rashi in here, and just about all of them go to town on this one tiny little Rashi that we're going to see today. So we're going to get a little flavor for what we can learn from one tiny, tiny little Rashi. So let's see. All the way at the end of Parshas Toldos, all the way at the end. So a lot of drama takes place in Parshas Toldos. We're told about the birth of Yitzchak and Esav, the twins, and they couldn't be further from one another, even if they were both carried in the same womb by their mother Rivka, by Rebecca. Nonetheless, they were very, very different. Yitzchak, we know, ends up being one of our 3 patriarchs. Esav, his brother, that hunter, he ends what? You said Yitzchak. Oh, I'm sorry. Yaakov and Esav are born in this week's parsha, not Yitzchak. Good, thank you, Cindy. So Yaakov ends up being the third of our 3 patriarchs, and Esav, his twin brother, ends up being a pretty nefarious character. And we're told after the whole incident where Yaakov deceives his father Yitzchak based on his mother Rivka's instructions, and he dresses up as Esav and he receives the blessings of Yitzchak. We're told at the end of the parsha it's time for him to get out of Dodge. He's got to leave. Rivka tells him that it's the best thing for him to leave because Esav wants to kill him. And now we're going to see how Yitzchak confirms everything that Rivka has just told Yaakov, that it would be much safer for you to leave. We're going to see those instructions. So we're on page 1, right at the top. It's chapter 28. That's Perek Chav Ches. We're going to see 5 psukim, 5 verses. So Aleph 1. Vayikra Yitzchak el Yaakov. Yitzchak summons in Yaakov, vayivarech oso, and he blesses him. Vayitzaveu, and he gives him the following instructions. Vayomer lo, he says to him, Lo sikach isha mibnos Canaan. I don't want you to take a wife from the local girls, from the daughters of Canaan. Beis kum lech Padan Aram. I want you to go off to Padan Aram. Beisa Besua Lavi Imecha. That's the place where Besua lives, and he's your uncle. Your grandfather. He was the father of your mother, and it's Lavan, Uncle Lavan, that he's going to be with there. The Kach Lecha Risham Isha Mibnos Lavan Achi Mecha. And I want you to find a girl, someone from Lavan's family, who's your uncle. No, it's one of your cousins. That'll be someone that you will marry. God Almighty should bless you, make you fruitful, multiply you. You should be a great, great nation. Daled 4, and God should transfer to you the blessing of Avram and to all of your offspring after you, that he should give to you as a inheritance this land of your sojournings. The same land that God promised Avram, that should go to you and your descendants. Hey, finally, Vayishlach Yitzchak es Yaakov. Yitzchak now sends away Yaakov. Vayelech Padan Aram. He goes up to this place called Padan Aram. Just wonder why they. Yeah, okay. They go off to Padan Aram. El Lavan ben Besuel, to Lavan, who is the son of Besuel Arami. He's an Aramean. Now, who was Lavan? Achi Rivka. Lavan is the brother of Rivka. Aim Yaakov Esav. And by the way, in case you were wondering who Rivka is the mother of both Yaakov and Esav. So here's a fantastic Rashi that's tiny, 4 words. Aim Yaakov Esav. So Rashi is going on the words in the pasuk that reminds us, for just in case you forgot, who was Rivka, by the way? She was the mother of both Yaakov and Esav. Eini Yodeya, I do not know, Ma Malamdenu. What is the Torah telling us? What's the Torah teaching us? And he put in the brackets there. We already know from the entire narrative that Rebecca was their mother. Well, why does it throw in this detail? There's no extra words in the Torah. And Rashi's being very honest here. He says, I don't know. I just don't get it. Why did the Torah feel the need to throw that in? That she, by the way, in case you forgot who Rivka is the mother of both Yaakov and Esav. That's what Rashi says. Now, this is a very puzzling Rashi because Rashi is never really at a loss for words. Rashi always seems to have a commentary here. And you're telling me that he couldn't think of anything the Torah was teaching here? What does that mean? So let's see one of the commentaries on Rashi. One of the main commentaries on Rashi is known as the Sifsei Chachamim. So this is a much later commentary. I believe he's written in the 1600s or 1700s, rather. His name was Rabbi Shabsi Bass. So here's what he comments on Rashi. Rashi said 4 words. I don't know what these words in the Torah are coming to teach us. Yesh makshim. There are those who ask. Who are those? Those who are ask? Well, again, here's one book that has 11 commentaries on Rashi. Just about all of them ask this. And they all ask, Ma balo dienu. What is Rashi doing? Shenu Yodea im lo yada yishtak. Why does Rashi feel the need to express, oh, I don't know what this is coming to tell? If you don't know, just stay silent. Why do you have to insert yourself and say, oh, by the way, I don't know what this pasuk is doing? Just don't say anything. And then, well, no, you don't have something to say. Or what does that mean? So he says, V'yesh lomar, here's what he thinks is the best answer to this. Why did Rashi feel the need to say something? Because Rashi is giving us an insight into how he comments. He says, Yesh lomar, de Rashi yada sheyesh liyashev bekama anfei beferushe hamafarshim. Rashi knows there are a gazillion ways to explain why the Torah felt the need to remind us that Rivka is the mother of both Yaakov and Esav. You know, there's many ways you could possibly explain this. Avalo yada, what Rashi did not know was Ezehu Amiti liyashev apshitu shel mikra. Rashi's goal, and he tells us this numerous times in his commentary, is I'm here to offer an explanation that could guide someone according to the most simple meaning of the scripture, of the Torah. And I know that there are numerous ways to explain why it is that the Torah felt the need to step up and say that Rivka was the mother of both Yaakov and Esav. I just don't know which pshat, which comment I could offer, which suggestion I could make that would stay true to my mission of offering the most simple interpretation. That's how the Sifsei Chachamim wants to say why Rashi felt the need to comment, that he was basically giving us an insight. It's an eye into Rashi's process and his commentary to Torah. Sure, there are many things he could have offered, but here he was stumped because he could have suggested 30 different answers, but he didn't know which one qualifies as being most pshuto shel mikra, what's the simplest one, and that was always Rashi's goal.
You just said that on Laban, the son of Basual, because we already know that. The brother of Rebecca, we already know. We know.
Here too, it says it again, your mother's brother.
Yeah, I mean,
Right.
it repeats it the whole.
Right.
The whole pasuk.
I guess though, but there, right, there's some there, but there's no,
The first time it was no.
right. It's not. They were in Chayesara, but again, I think it's most pronounced about Rivka because the whole parsha began with her pregnancy and the twins. The story, we all know. You know, someone might be a little bit doubtful. You know, okay, who was Rivka's brother? And you could, you stop a kid and quiz him in school. We'll probably find lots of kids who aren't certain that Lavan and Rivka were brothers. You'll ask them, okay, who was Besuel, and you'll run into some blanks. But you'll be hard pressed to find any Jewish kid in school who doesn't know that Rivka is the mother of both Yaakov and Esav. And that just seems to be incredibly unnecessary piece of information here. So that's why Rashi jumps on this. So this is the way that the Sifsei Chachamim wants to explain that Rashi. I'm not saying this is perfect. I'm just saying this is an example of someone who's struggling with this. As I said, though, what you'll find is that all the commentaries on Rashi are struggling with this. Many of them offer answers of their own. Basically say, okay, Rashi couldn't tell you what this was coming to do, but I've got a very good suggestion what this was coming. And we'll see a couple of those too. We will see some of those. But again, what's interesting about the Sifsei Chachamim is he's not coming to suggest an answer, saying, okay, here's something Rashi may have missed. He says, no, Rashi could have given you 30 explanations. He just didn't know which was the one that fit his criteria as most pshuto shel mikra. So that's why he's leaving this blank. And by telling us this comment, he's letting us know what his goal was. His goal as a commentator was, I wasn't just writing to fill my notebook. I was writing to guide people about pshuto shel mikra. What's the most simple way to understand the verses? And if I can't do that, I'm not going to offer something. That's what the Sifsei Chachamim wants to offer. Give us an insight into Rashi's strategy. Okay. But again, what you'll find many of the commentaries do is they don't take this tact the track that Sisei Chachamim took, they all are saying, okay, if Rashi didn't know what it's coming to tell you, let me make some suggestions. That's basically what everybody else does that I could find. I want to show you perhaps what might be the most radical. The most radical one that I saw is on the top of page 2. And this is the Maskil David. And that's in this, I have that in here. Maskil David was written by David Pardo. I believe he lived in the 1700s, and he was an Italian rabbi. So Rabbi David Pardo, what he wants to do is he wants to look at this Rashi, and he's going to, you're going to see as we read this together, he's going to completely take this Rashi in a direction none of us have ever thought of before. We all read this Rashi. Rashi himself is speaking. Rashi is saying, me, Rabbi Rashi, the commentary to the Torah, I don't know what this verse is coming to teach. That's the way everybody looks at this Rashi. This Maskil David, because of the fact, obviously, he's bothered by, like, how could it be Rashi doesn't have an idea? You're going to see how he takes this Rashi. To me, this is the most radical way to read this. Let's see what he does. Maskil David says as follows. Im Yaakov, Esav, Eni Yodeh, Rashi says, I don't know. Hakusha Mevueres. The question is so clear. Ukvar Hergishu Bo Kol Mefarshim Zal. And all the commentaries on Rashi all pounce on this. Dema Ba Lulamdenu. What is Rashi coming to tell us? She'enu Yodeya, if he doesn't know what to say. Im lo yada yishtok. If he doesn't know what to say, just stay silent. There are many psukim in the Torah that Rashi doesn't have a commentary on. He didn't always feel the need to pipe up and say, oh, by the way, the reason I'm not commenting here is because I don't know what this is telling us. He doesn't do that wherever he doesn't comment. So let this be one word. There's just no Rashi on this pasuk. Why did he feel the need to do this? And everyone's got their own answers. Maskil David is going to say, completely different way to read this Rashi. Look at this. It says, third line, Venir lanias daiti, it appears, this is what I would suggest. Shekavana, so here's what Rashi's intent was. Lefi shemargish ba, shemargish ma ba kasul lamdenu. Rashi's struggling with, what is the pasuk coming to teach us? Until this point, were we unaware that Rivka is the mother of Yaakov and Esav? The whole parsha began with her pregnancy and the twins, everything. V'tirates, what's Rashi saying? The pasuk itself is telling us, Shekach Omer le beferish Yitzchak liYaakov, that Rashi is coming to tell you, you may have missed it, but let me tell you what Yitzchak, the father, was instructing Yaakov. He was saying to him, Ani sholachacha etzel Lavan. I am sending you to your uncle, to my brother-in-law Lavan. And I don't know Lavan. I've never met him because I've never left Israel. Yitzchak's saying, I've never left Israel. I don't know Lavan. V'yatabini, you, Yaakov, my son, hishamer mimenu. Be careful. Lefi she'enu yodea ma masav. I don't know what kind of a guy he is. I don't know if he's a liar, if he's a cheat, if he's an evil guy, if he's a tzaddik. I don't know who he is. Be on guard. Vatam, and what's the reason, She'enu Yodea? Why is it that I'm so uncertain? Besides the fact I've never met him, why is it that I've got no clues as to who he is? Levi she'en li me'achoso, I don't have from his sister, meaning from my wife Rivka, who's his sister, I only have Elabez Banim. I have two sons. I've got you, Yaakov, and you're a tzaddik, Ve'esav, and I've got Esav, who I now know is a Rasha. Now that Rivka's explained to me why she set you up to take the brachos, and now I gave you Avram's blessing and everything. So now I realize I've got two kids. Yaakov's a tzaddik, Esav is a Rasha. V'yadua, and there's a Talmudic principle that's out there, Sherov habanim domim la'achia em. Most of the time, sisters have a lot in common with their brothers. So, I'm sorry. Most of the time, sons, the Sherova banim domim la'achiaim. Most of the time, sons have a lot in common with the brother of their mother, meaning their uncles. Very often, there are incredible similarities between nephews and their uncles. So he says, "Him ach b'shanim." So he said, "Ach b'shnayim." But here, I only have two sons. I only have Yaakov and I only have Esav. Lo shayich rov. I can't apply the principle of rov. In other words, we have this concept that says rov banim domim lachiaim. Most of one's kids share some similar characteristic traits with their uncle. But I can't apply the concept here of rov to figure out what kind of an uncle. In other words, let's say I had 5 kids, 5 sons. 4 of them were tzaddikim and 1 was a Rasha. So I could say, okay, the odds are Lavan must be okay. because if I'm going to take this Talmudic principle that most of the nephews have some similarities with the uncle, so I could say if I had 5 kids, I could say and 4 of them were good and one was rotten, the uncle must be okay. I only have 2 sons. I've got Yaakov and I've got Esav. One's okay, one's not okay. I don't have the ability to say rove. It's 50-50. So now I have no idea what kind of a guy Lavan is. That's what he's saying. Lo shaykh rov. V'zehu ma shemalamdenu akasav. This is what the pasuk is hinting at. Shekach amar le Yitzchak. This is what Yitzchak was saying to Yaakov. Eni yodeya ma. Meaning, Rashi's not saying, Rashi, don't know what this is coming to tell us. Rashi's saying what Yitzchak was telling Yaakov. Eni yodeya, your dad, Yitzchak, Eni yodeya, I don't know what to tell you about Uncle Lavan. Because what do I know? Rivka is both Aim, Yaakov, and Esav. Your mom, the only clue I could have as to what kind of a character your uncle is by looking at the children that your mother bore, because they're his nephews. But all I have is you and Esav. That's not enough to say a rove, that there's any kind of majority here. So he's saying, it's not that Rashi is saying, Eini Yodea, Rashi, don't know what to make of its pasuk. Rather, Rashi's explaining it, his suggestion. He's suggesting Rashi's explaining it, that Yitzchak is saying, Eini Yodea, I don't know what to tell you about Uncle Lavan. Klomar, Mama Sav, I don't know what to tell you what kind of a guy Lavan is. And then he says, Ayin Mashakasav, look what else I've written in other parshios that deal with this principle about using the nephews to identify the uncle. So I'm bringing this as an example of what I think is the most radical way to read Rashi, because you have people who are reading Rashi as being as true to his words as possible, that what Rashi is saying, I don't know. But if Rashi says, I don't know, then you got the $1,000,000 question. Why did he feel the need to do that? Just don't comment on the pasuk, and everyone will see. You didn't comment on this pasuk, just like you didn't comment on plenty of pasukim in the Torah. So why did Rashi feel the need to stick up and say something? So as Maskell David is saying, it must be that we misread this Rashi. And that it's not Rashi saying, I don't know. Rashi is actually explaining the verse. And he's saying that's what Yitzchak was saying to Yaakov. I don't know what to tell you about Lavan, so make sure to be on your to have your antennas up. Make sure to be on guard, because I don't know what kind of a guy he is. And why don't I know? Because your mother Rivka is both the aim, she's the mother of both Yaakov and Esav. I'm not saying this is simple, and I'm not saying this is, if I had to vote about what Rashi might really be saying, I'm not saying I'm going to go with this Maskila David. I just thought this was incredibly creative, what he's doing with a Rashi that everyone is saying problematic, rather than just say, okay, well, let me offer my own 2 cents. Rashi didn't know, so I know. He's saying, no, Rashi didn't say I don't know. Rashi was actually explaining the pasuk, saying Yitzchak was saying I don't know. I thought that's right. I thought that's very, very creative. Again, am I saying that this is pshat in Rashi? I'm hesitant to say that, but I think this is incredibly, incredibly creative.
To go with that too, because if Rashi's questioning Laban character, then why would he have sent his son there?
Because he realizes he's in danger now. Well, I wouldn't say he's in danger. Rivka said he's in danger. Yitzchak didn't say he's in danger. He's sending him because I want you to find a good wife. I'm nervous here. I see the local girls. The local girls, they got me nervous. They're all idol worshipers and whatnot. But I saw your mom came out okay from her surroundings. So I want you to go back there and find someone who, who followed her path. So, but just be careful about that uncle, because I don't know what kind of a guy he is. That's how
interesting that Rivka never tells Yaakov what kind of a family life she has.
So there's a lot that's said about this, because correct. So there's a lot that's written about the relationship between Rivka and Yitzchak. That's the relationship we know least of between any of the patriarchs and matriarchs in the Torah. There's a very famous comment from the Netziv of Volozhin in his commentary to the Torah, the Hamek Davar, that he says something. If you look back at the end of last week's parsha, it says that when Rivka first saw Yitzchak, she was so blown away by he was such a holy personality. It says Vayipol me'al gomol, that she almost like fell off of the camel. She was just in shock. And he basically says something pretty radical there. He says they didn't have a relationship with open communication. She was so awestruck by him and was so blown away by the spiritual status that he was at that they just didn't have open channels of communication. And he uses that to explain this whole incident of the brachos, is that why did this whole thing have to happen with Yaakov dressing up as Esav? Why didn't Rivka just have a good talk with Yitzchak at some point and say, hubby, I think you got this wrong. You're all ready to give these blessings to Esav because you think he's a good guy, or you think that these blessings are going to pull him back to the light side. He's rotten. He's rotten to the core. And I'm saying this as a mom who loves him. Why didn't she ever have that conversation? So the Netziv uses that idea to explain that, and it could explain a lot of things about that relationship. He's the one who says this straight out, and you could use that to explain a lot so this might get back to your point. We finally saw Rivka right before, I didn't have the psukim here, but right before this conversation, when Yitzchak summons Yaakov and says, I want you to go back to Lavan's house to find a wife because I don't like the local girls, Rivka does speak to Yitzchak. And what she tells Yitzchak is, I'm going to go out of my mind from the local girls and do me a favor. I'm disgusted by these local girls. And if he's going to marry one of them, I may as well just throw in the towel. I'm going to lose it. And that's when he calls him. What Rivka did not tell Yitzchak in that conversation was, I'm scared that Esav's going to kill Yaakov. She didn't tell him that. All she's and when she told Yaakov that you got to get out of here, she gave him two reasons to go. Was you'll find a nice girl there, but also you got to get away from Esav. So again, you see this. The communication is there's a breakdown or it never existed in the first place. Something, and the Netziv is very sensitive to that. So that might answer your question there. But let's get back to this Rashi. Rashi, in its most plain sense, Rashi was saying, I don't know what this is coming to tell us. Now, again, what I said is the majority of the commentators say, okay, Rashi, if for whatever reason, God was keeping it from you, let me tell you what I came up with. That's what most of the commentators do. And we'll see some examples of that now. But again, what the Sifsei Chachamim did was very interesting, was that he was saying, of course, Rashi had suggestions. He just didn't know which suggestion was going to fit in his mission statement. That was the Sifsei Chachamim. Now let's take a look at some examples of people who actually do say, someone who does say a suggestion. We're going to look at Rav Sorotzkin and his Aznaim LaTorah. So let's see what he does here. He says something that is very interesting. He says, Eim Yaakov Esav. Again, Rashi says, Einu Yodea Mamalamdenu. Rashi said, I don't know what that's coming to teach us. We already know that Rivka was the mother of both Yaakov and Esav. So here's what Rav Sorotzkin suggests. Venira, here's what it appears to me, is that on the one hand, you might say that here's why the pasuk is emphasizing it. Because you might doubt, why on earth was Yitzchak sending his beloved son Yaakov, who he knows is his little tzaddik, why is he sending him to Lavan's house? You already know that this family has produced some bad seed, because now you know who Esav is. You finally figured out who Esav is, and he has roots in this family. So you may wonder, someone may have made the argument, stay away from this family, because look what it breeds. It brought an Esav to this world. Shenolad mimenu Esav, because the girl who came out of this family produced an Esav, Harasha. So to this, Yitzchak's thinking, but look at the local girls. Look at the Canaanite families around me. Noldu banim adomim ach v'rak le'esav. Everyone around me is producing kids who are just like Esav. However, mishpachas Besual Arami, but from Besual's family, where Rivka came from, true, it produced an Esav, but look who else it produced. Yatzagam Yaakov. It also produced a Yaakov. So in other words, you're right. There may be something rotten in this family, but it also produced a Yaakov. So if I've got to make a decision now, I'm going to say I want to try to minimize the damage. Where am I going to minimize the damage? All around me, I see the Canaanim are producing people who are just as bad, if not worse than Esav. But from that family there, at least they produced a Yaakov. So let's roll with the dice now. Let's see what we can get. I see that we can get something good out of this family. Let's see what the other girls can produce. Lefichach Bachar Yitzchak es hara b'miyuto. Yitzchak was looking to see, how can I minimize the damage? Around me, I see Canaanim. All they're producing is things which are rotten. So the pasuk is emphasizing that Rivka was both the mother of Yaakov and Esav, And what that's doing is driving home the message to make us understand what's Yitzchak's mindset. Yitzchak's mindset is, I've got to minimize the damage. And where are the best odds? So far, the best odds are coming from Besuel's house in Padan Aram, because you're right, it produced an Esau, but it also produced the Yaakov. That's where our best odds are. So he says, Lefichach Bachar Yitzchak es harabbim miyuto. He's trying to find where's the least amount of bad. B'mishpacha, I want to find a family. Sheyatzu mimenu Esav. You're right. It came out in Esav. Avol gam Yaakov, but it also produced the Yaakov. So that's his suggestion about this here. That's why the Torah is emphasizing Aim Yaakov Esav, in case anyone's questioning Yitzchak's judgment. What are you doing, sending this guy to the house of Besuel? Besuel has got a bad track record. He produced an Esav. Yeah, but he also produced a Yaakov. Don't forget about that. And that's almost like coming in defense of him. Interesting idea. Let's see. Let's go to page 3. Page 3, here's something that you'll find an idea. A lot of contemporary writers say this. And what I liked about this article, this was from an OU Jewish Action magazine of a couple of years ago. He quotes a Gemara, very good Gemara. So look at this. This is from Rabbi Dr. Josh Joseph. So he says, being Maver Sedra means going over the Parsha each week. Of course, with the All Parsha app, that's an OU app. That's his joke here. One comes across interesting comments made by Rashi that might otherwise go unnoticed. In Bereshis 28:5, that's the one we're looking at. But again, later in 35:13, he comments, Rashi says, Eni Yodea Mamalamdenu. I do not know what the addition of these words intend to tell us. Since Rashi's translation is not linear, there are many places where he writes no commentary. If Rashi doesn't know something, then he doesn't need to say anything. Now, he quotes the Lubavitcher Rebbe. I was trying to find it inside. I couldn't. I was looking online, different Sfarim. Again, there's so many works. I don't know which one to look at. He says the Lubavitcher Rebbe wanted to make this make sense, quoting a Gemara in Brachos. Let's look at that Gemara. He says that Rashi is modeling that when we encounter something we don't know, we should be honest with ourselves. As Brachos, the Gemara says in Brachos 4a, Lamed l'shoncha lo ma'ar eni yodea. Make yourselves accustomed to saying, custom your tongue to say, I don't know. Shema tisbadeh v'teachez. Because if we don't say I don't know, what'll I do? I'll just make something up, and then I'll become entangled in deceit. How many times does that happen? That I want to keep up the veneer that I'm a know-it-all. I know everything. So someone will ask me a question, and I'll just say, like, I'm not going to just say I don't know, because then I'm going to look foolish. I look like I'm not well read. So I'll just blurt out an answer, and then what happens? I see that I'm wrong, but I don't want to say I was wrong, so I'll have to come up with some kind of twisted reason to make sure, no, I really was right. So the Gemara tells us, Lamed l'shoncha lomar eni yodea. We have to accustom ourselves. We have to train ourselves to learn how to say, I don't know. It doesn't come naturally, because saying I don't know means I don't have all the answers in this world. I'm not as smart as other people may think I am, as I oftentimes think I am. So I have to learn to say, I don't know. And he's saying that's what Rashi is teaching us here. Rashi is perhaps being the ultimate teacher by telling us Eni Yodea, but Mamalamdenu. You're saying, okay, just leave it blank. But then he'd be missing this opportunity. Rashi's teaching us something. He's teaching us that line in Brachos, Lamed l'shoncha lomar eni yodea. We have to learn. We have to train ourselves to say, I don't know. But it's not just the trap of being caught by saying something untrue or unwise. If we just start saying stuff, the lesson for humility is to admit both what we don't know, as well as the sheer recognition that we don't know. How many times do we've all run into know-it-alls, and they're annoying. No one likes dealing with know-it-alls. And that's what he said, we have to learn and train ourselves to say, I don't know. Look at here on the bottom of page 3. I thought this was interesting. This was another Chabad website, but what I was just Googling about when Rashi says, I don't know. So I found this article, 14 facts you should know, 14 Rashi facts you should know. So it was an interesting article, a lot about Rashi that you may not have known. And number 10 was, he was not ashamed to admit he did not know. In more than a dozen instances in a commentary in the Torah, Rashi writes that he does not know the meaning or explanation of a given verse. While there are scholarly debates regarding what exactly he did not know, like we saw that Sifsei Chakamim that says, of course he had different ideas, he just didn't know which one was the Pshutot Shel Mikra, or whatever it is, the fact remains that he humbly paved the way for the rest of us to admit when we do not yet know something and turn to others for guidance. So I think this is something we could all learn when we see that Rashi and the couple times in Torah where he does say that, Eni Yodea Mamalamdenu, I don't know what it's teaching us. We can all say, well, if Rashi is not ashamed to say Eni Yodea, why should I ever be ashamed? So it's something that It's something that we should all learn and train ourselves to do. And as I think we all know in our own lives and people we know, it doesn't necessarily come naturally. Okay, we have time, so let's look at page 4. I was nervous we weren't going to get to page 4. Page 4 is a totally separate Divrei Torah, and we're going to see something from both the Torah Tamima, who is Rav Baruch Halevi Epstein, as well as, again, from those Naima Torah. So let's see. A little bit later in the Torah, so again, we just read where Yitzchak is telling Yaakov, I don't like the local girls, so therefore I want you to go back to the family where your mom came from, your mom's family, and find a girl there. So the pasuk tells us in Ches and Tes 8 and 9, Vayar Esav. So now Esav saw Kiros benos Canaan. So now Esav sees that, okay, my parents don't like the local girls. Beina Yitzchak Aviv. He didn't really care about his mom. He sees that they're bad in his father's eyes. He sees, okay, I always knew mom didn't like me too much, but dad, I thought I had him hoodwinked all along. Now he's gotten wise to me, and I see he doesn't like the local girls. So what does he do? Tes, Vayelech Esav el Yishmael. So he says, okay, he doesn't like the local girls. So, okay, he sent Yaakov to go find someone from the mom's side. I'll go find someone got more Avraham stock in him. So he goes and he goes to Yishmael, his uncle, great uncle Yishmael. Vayikachas machlas bas Yishmael ben Avraham. And he marries a girl there. He marries one of the daughters of Yishmael. It's I'm not sure if it's an actual daughter or a granddaughter, but it's someone from Yishmael's family whose name is Machalas, and he adds her into his collection of wives. So a lot of commentators point out, notice how he didn't get rid of his wives. In other words, if he's really so concerned that dad doesn't like the local girls, because they're all idol worshippers, so that would have led him to get rid of the local wives and start over again. He didn't do that, but what does he do? He goes to Uncle Yishmael, great Uncle Yishmael, gets a girl from there and adds him to his harem of wives. That's what we're told about Esav. So the Torah Tamima here quotes a famous Gemara that you may be familiar with. The Gemara says, and that's what he's quoting here from Yerushalmi and Bikurim. It says, "V'chi Machlas Shema." Was her name really Machlas? Although Basmas Shema. Elsewhere, it refers to when we learned about Yishmael, it tells us that Yishmael, his daughter, was named Basmas. So why here is she known as Machlas? Ella, it's teaching us Melamed. It teaches us Shenimchalu lo kol avonosav, that all of his sins were forgiven when he married her. Mikan, from this we learn Shechasan Shemochlin lo avonosav, that when a groom gets married, he's forgiven of his sins. And this is where we learn it from. In other words, that the real name of this woman was Basmas. Why does the Torah call her Machlas? Because the word Machal means to forgive, Mechila. So therefore, the Torah was teaching us that Esav attained some degree of Mechila, attained forgiveness when he got married. And this is where the tradition comes from, that brides and grooms on their wedding day, they're forgiven of their sins. It's like their own personal Yom Kippur. They get a clean slate. This is the source. This is where we know it from. That's the Gemara. So let's see the Torah Tamima in the next paragraph. That is Rav Baruch Halevi Epstein commenting on that Gemara. He says, Eno mavur klal, it's not explained at all. Ma ra lidros sham ze bidrasha rechoka kazu l'chara. The Chazal, our sages of the Talmud, what egged them on to make this drasha, to make this teaching from this? All they saw was that the Torah called her Machlas. Now you're going to tell me that he attained Mechila, he attained forgiveness? We're talking about Esav here. Esav was a pretty nasty character. So we're going to say that Esav attained, we're going to learn from this that a bride and groom on their wedding day, they attain forgiveness. How did you learn that? Just because her name was Machlas? He says, Efshar Lomar, it's possible to say as follows. If the Torah took the step of changing this woman's name, which really was Basmas, and it changed it to a name, of all the names it could have given her, it didn't call her, I don't know, Rachel, it called her Machlas, which seems to indicate something about Mechila. Specifically at a point when Esav was trying to do something good that might finally give his father some nachas by getting a wife who was not a local girl, that he saw that the local girls were bad in the eyes of his father Yitzchak. And he went to Yishmael. What do we know? That God doesn't withhold the reward from anybody. So maybe that's what's triggering this teaching. Therefore, Ramaz Khan, the asa nachas ruach liyitzchak, since Esav was trying to do something, which was giving nachas to Yitzchak, binyan nisuin, and it had something to do with getting married to a girl who was not a local girl. Ba'ashem hamora al mechila. That's why the Torah gave her a name that has some indication to the word mechila, laharos, to teach us she'avor kvodo liYitzchak, because of the fact he was trying to honor Yitzchak and give him some nachas. Machalo HaKadosh Baruch Hu azal v'nosav. That's why God forgave him for all the wrongdoings that Esav had done. What else do we learn from this? Derech Agav. We also learn from this. She'az eis ratzon la'kadosh baruch hu l'shalem schar tov l'hachasan v'limchol avonosav. So we could also learn out of this. If the Torah is telling us that he was already trying to do something right, and we know God doesn't hold anything back, and that's why he named her Machlas. The Torah calls her Machlas to indicate that Hashem gave him Mechila. We can learn from this that it's not just limited to Esav, but this would be true for all people starting off that new stage of life as a bride and groom, that they also attain Mechila. Achen, therefore, Kedei Sheyeh Adam Mitzido Goram Lazeh. But that may have been, Esav may have deserved some mechila because he did something right. He was trying to do something and show honor to his father on his wedding day by marrying this daughter of Yishmael. But what could the rest of us do? In order that we could do something which will bring along, that God will say, okay, I'll be mochel you, I'll give you forgiveness, a bride and groom on your wedding day. What should we do? That's where the minhag came from. That's where the custom came from, for a Jewish bride and groom to fast on their wedding day, to do something which is indicating that we're interested in teshuvah. In other words, Esav did something to show he stepped out of his comfort zone by getting this new wife who was not from the local idol-worshipping families. And that's why he attained Mechila. So that taught us also that on our wedding days, if we need to indicate to Hashem that we're doing something, stepping out of our comfort zone, you might say, that's where the idea came to fast, and we could hope for Mechila as well. That's how he wanted to learn this. Let's look what Rav Sorotzkin does with this. So Rav Sorotzkin, in this last piece on page 4, Vayikakas Machlas, Chazal Darshu, our sages learn from here that there are 3 people, Chacham, Chasan, and Anasi, Gedula Mekaperes. If they attain a greater position, meaning let's say some Chacham, some rabbi gets a new position, a new posting, he attains Mechila. A Chasan, a bride and groom on their wedding day, they attain Mechila. Nasi, someone who's appointed to a position of leadership, they attain Mechila. When they get Gedula, when they get a new position, that Mechaperes, that gives Kapar, that gives atonement. So Chasan, how do I know that a Chasan, a groom, that he attains? Because it says that he married Machlas Bas Yishmael, and the Gemara says, this is what we saw up above, V'chi Machlas Shma, was her name really Machlas? V'lo Basmas Shma, her name was Basmas. Ela Shenimchlu Lo Kol Avonosav. Why was she called Machlas? Because by marrying her, he was forgiven for everything. So Rav Sorotzkin says, Kasha, I don't understand. Imba Kasos Lamdenu. If the Torah here, by calling her Machlas, wants to teach us that God forgives the bride and groom on their wedding day for all their sins, Lama Nemar Davar Zeh Bechupas Esav in Machlas. Find another place to teach me this. Why are you teaching me this by Esav? Esav is a nasty character. Find another place. Find a way to teach me this when it came to Avram marrying Sarah, when it came to Yitzchak marrying Rivka, Yaakov marrying Rachel or Leah. Why are you teaching me this here? So he says, V'yesh lomar sheba lashmeinu beis dvarim. The Torah, by using the name Machlas to teach us, wanted to teach us 2 things. Aleph, she'af im harbe achason lipshoa ke'esav harasha. Even if that chasan, if that groom has lived and has sinned so many times in his life until his wedding day, even as much as Esav, mochlin lo al kol avonosav yom chupaso. Even a chasan like that can merit to be forgiven. So in other words, if this worked for Esav, this could work for any of us. That's the first reason why it's teaching it here. Beis, what's the second reason why Esav was chosen as the source for this? Shadafka im yesh lo hirhure tshuva, because it wants to emphasize the only time that this works, that's a bride, groom, that they get forgiven on their wedding day for everything they've done wrong, that's only if they had thoughts of repentance. Sharei Esav lo kachas machlas. In other words, the proof text here is great, because Esav did have some act of teshuva here. What did he do? He specifically journeyed to Yishmael to marry one of his girls because mipnei sheratza bezel lasos ratzon aviv. He wanted to do some kind of kibbut avav. He wanted to give some nachas to his father finally about not marrying a local idol worshiping girl. Shenemar vayar Esav kiros benos Canaan. Esav saw that the girls of Canaan were bad, be'enei Yitzchak and eyes of his father Yitzchak, and that's why he wanted to marry them. Yeshua ben Levi Darash Nasan Daito Liskayer, and he says over there that he darshan that Esav even had thoughts to convert. Now Esav didn't need to convert; it's before Torah. What he means is change his course in life. Ela Shalom Niskaima Machshavto, but he never actually was able to follow through on it. But at least he had the thoughts. He had thoughts that I want to clean up my act and get a fresh start. He just didn't follow through on it. So Rav Sorotzkin he's looking at the same Gemara and he's saying it's a beautiful concept that a chassan, a bride, a groom, they're forgiven on their wedding day. But why is this the source for this? So it's two answers. Number one, this is the best source for this because now we can say even if someone was as nasty as Esav, has done as much wrong as Esav, they're forgiven. So if that's true for Esav, that's true for every member of the Jewish people. And second, because what do we know about Esav here? He didn't just walk into the marriage and boom, there was some act here of teshuva involved. He was doing something. He was changing course in life. He was saying, I'm going to get away from those idol worshiping wives that I have, even though he didn't totally leave them, but I'm going to walk away from them, so to say, to go to Yishmael to marry one of his girls and give some nachas to my parents. That was some degree of an act of teshuva. So that teaches us that if we want this principle to kick in and work for us, it's not enough just to get married, but we have to get married, but also think, have here hure teshuva, thoughts of how am I going to change my life? What am I going to do different now that I have this opportunity? So that's what he seems to indicate. This is the best place to teach us this lesson. It's not an accident that this was here. All right, so we see here are some lessons from the end of the parsha, which I think is good because very often when we learn, we get so focused on the beginning of the parsha. So here are some things from the end. All right, sure. Yes, Avi.
There's a book that was written and published, I think, this year, beginning of the year, called The War Against the Bible.
Okay.
And it was written by Rabbi Eli Michel.
Okay.
And one of his main thoughts are the fact that Esav marries